My name's Luke Pellen and I'm an artist. That's when I was with the comedy club that we had for a while back here. And then we ended up doing a play.
Yeah.
Which was good fun.
Star Trek and Star Wars. How can you
That's right.
Of both?
And Alien.
And Alien.
So there's a lot. Well, actually, well, let me. And if this is of interest, I don't know. See, this is. Passing the Turing Test. So this was. I had to wait for years for this after 6 years.
What's that?
This is an artificial intelligence textbook which they invited me to write a chapter for.
Wow.
So it's in here somewhere. I've got to remember where it is.
So you're an artist and you also are a published author about artificial intelligence.
Yes. So
how on earth those two?
Well, I like the creative side of things, I guess. Creative and the exploration side of things. And so scientific stuff, you kind of absorb knowledge, you take it in and then you experiment, and that's the creative side of things. And artificial intelligence was something that always amazed me. So here's my chapter here, an essay on passing the Turing Test. So the Turing Test, and I also go into here Octavius, which was my chess playing neural network, which I did in 1999. But yeah, programming and games creation, that sort of thing, has always interested me. So anything that's creative, really. So that's music, performing, and acting, and drawing, and painting, and programming, and making games. So all of those things are lots of fun. So yeah. So there's some other pictures around the place. I don't know if
I've got this big tripod. I'll just take the tripod and I'll move it so it's going into your office.
So yeah, I'll just
go over here.
All right.
We'll have a sit down. I like this walkthrough. We'll just
you do? Well, that's you seem pretty casual. I kind of just whatever we're doing. If you want me to sit down for a minute, we'll sit down for a minute. If you want to walk around.
I think if we go onto something.
Yeah, you're just trying to spontaneously capture if things are happening. That's good by me. But you can see I've got in here I've got a few old paintings, and I've put some stuff up around the wall here. So what else can I talk about? You can ask me some questions too.
We'll ask you some questions. First of all, I'm going to put this on autofocus so it actually does some autofocusing.
Yes, and so yeah, writing as well. Yeah, we said that. So I've done a bit of writing. I've had some fiction and some non-fiction published. I like science fiction.
Your piece?
Yeah, just a selection of kind of old pieces that I liked. So that background is surrealism. I really like surrealism. And that's become more and more abstract over the years. So realism isn't my thing. So I'm into quickly generating ideas. So I don't really have the patience for doing artwork that takes a long time.
So it's whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah. So I'm generative of ideas. That's I like to. And again, these are the sketchbooks over here. Kind of demonstrate that. And some of these, it's called a semic writing, made up writing, that kind of thing. Generate lots of little ideas, and then sometimes those ideas turn into larger pieces.
So how do you go from an idea like I'll see something like that, which is a beautiful piece, and my daughters would most probably have that in an A1 size print in their room. They'd love it, and like some of them are quite colourful, abstract,
Yes.
and then some are, let's look at this one up here. Looks like it's been shot in the face with a shotgun.
Yes, well, that, again, some of these. My philosophy has always been: I'm not scared to experiment, and I'm not scared to what you would say is fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's an integral part of experimentation. As soon as you get kind of caught up in second guessing yourself and that sort of thing, I don't think it's good. I'm into spontaneous creation and expression. And it's interesting because all these different types of activities kind of exercise different muscles. So I enjoy drawing, and I draw rapidly, and I really enjoy that. But then there's the kind of the temporal thing of music, where I enjoy improvising music.
Yeah.
But that's something that you're wise to have some kind of technical background in. I mean, it's wise to have some technical background in anything that you take up, but
Like you go into what I'd say is like the analog form of paint,
yes,
and paper,
yes,
and then you go
digital.
completely digital.
See, well, that's another thing. That's the interesting thing. So you've got. I've often thought that I don't draw with my eye. I draw with my hand, and it's like a dance. I enjoy the movement, the scribbling, all of that. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to something digital, especially with my background, which is programming, it's a completely different way to see things. You see it in terms of codes, algorithms, structures, and you put all this code together, and it's just amazing that you go tap, 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 run, and then you see an image. And so it's a feeling of incredible power to create images out of code, and you get completely different results, and you can do completely different things that you wouldn't normally do by hand with sketching or painting. So it's quite a different feel. And the other thing with this sort of I've had this theme for quite a while of this sort of generation of ideas. Because I've been interested in artificial life as well as artificial intelligence. And artificial life is a bit like looking at low, small scale things like ants or fungus or things like this, and seeing how they spread, how they grow, how they communicate. For example, pheromone systems with ants and things like that.
Pheromones. That was an interesting thing that I was talking to my daughter about, was communicating with chemicals. That's what we talked about.
Yes.
Right? And do we do that as people but not acknowledge it? And do you have to say, well, I'd say yes, because there's certain times that you have a certain physical reaction to something or someone that you've seen, and you can't consciously work out how it happened.
Well, it's
Or is it?
It's a rich tapestry, isn't it? It's deeper. It's multi-faceted, multi-dimensional. And so my present journey, or what I've been doing for a while, has been like the idea of my rapid sketches, rapid development of ideas. What you can do is do that with a computer, because computers are so much faster. Mm-hmm. So you can get a computer to output lots of ideas, but you still have to code it. There's still a lot of work there. And what you can do, instead of natural selection, you have artificial selection. So it's an aesthetic selection where you say, I like that, I like that, I like that. And you can actually breed the results and get new forms which inherit forms from their, say, parent images. So it's quite an experimental, weird territory to be in, and it can be difficult to explain. I was trying to think of an example. For example, there's a program called Langton's Ant, where you can give an ant a completely randomized brain. It's a digital brain, and it behaves randomly. It just walks all over the place. It's an idiot. That's what you would expect. But what you can do is you can lay out a little path to some food. You can put this ant down, and it won't get there. It's just completely random. But what you do is you get 100 of these ants, all with completely random brains. You test them out. Just through sheer luck, a couple of them will do all right. They might get close to the food. You take the best ones, you breed them, and you do it again, and you keep repeating. And eventually you will produce an ant which will be able to follow a path, like a pheromone path, and get to the food. And the idea behind this is that it's done all that without me understanding how it's done it. So I've implemented, at a high level, I've implemented this kind of...
selective process.
Yeah, that's right. This kind of Darwinian evolution on an electronic scale. And I've kind of engineered how the brains work in a sense, but I don't know the guts, I don't know the processing, I don't know its logic. And that's sort of what got me hooked, is that you can create things that you don't understand that can do things that you do understand. Yeah.
Something worked, and I don't know why it worked. And people just went off, and I'm like, far out. So move this one just around a bit.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, well,
well,
as I said, the performing part of things is interesting because it's, I guess I'm a relative latecomer to that. So in 1999, when I was 29, I turned up to a reading with my brother at a theatre group, and it was just sort of on a whim. I was just like, okay, I'll check this out, do something a bit social, just turn up for a reading, and then we both ended up being cast in the main role. The main roles, and that was directed by Tim Rocco, a friend of mine. But it was fascinating because I was just reading, and then he was like, okay, well, how would you like the role? And I was kind of like, well, I'm just here reading, I'm not interested in the theatre. But it was a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. I don't know if you know that one. And to this day, it's probably one of the most difficult plays I've ever done. So it was like being thrown in the deep end, and it was really good. But it was a challenge, and I was always...
Do you like swimming? Yes.
Always up for a challenge. That's right. But it was another fascinating experience. Again, it's this, like music, it's this kind of, you have these different ways to create, like you code, you get stuck in your head, you draw, you use your hands, and then there's music and there's theatre, where what got me with theatre was this unbelievable precision of, you will go on, you will perform X amount of time, and you will finish. There's no escaping it. There's no putting it off, and there's no shying away from the fact that you're on a stage lit up and you have to entertain everyone. And it was so much kind of pressure in a good sense, you know. Like I say, it's this thing where you have to perform. You have to. What's the alternative? You just kind of collapse.
There's two parts I remember performing. I think I started getting into it maybe when I was 13 or 14, and there were two defining moments that I remember performing, and I had an interest in acting, and even some people said, oh, you should continue on with this. which is great for a 14-year-old's ego. But one was people talking about being scared on stage, and initially there was the nervousness and the apprehension going out there, but once I was actually out there, and because you're lit up, you can only maybe see the first 3 or 4 rows.
That's right.
And then I thought, well, I'm just going to do this just for this small group of people, because that's all I can see, and I don't feel too bad about that, not knowing that it was the highlight of Kingston, and basically everyone else had ABC or Channel 8 or the thing, and they didn't want to watch what was on TV, so they came to the show, so the whole place is packed out. And that wasn't too much of an issue. Then from there I went to a production which we had at a school, but what they were doing was going to each different school around the southeast, so Kangaroo Inn, Lucendale, Narracourt.
Yep.
And I remember going out there and I was feeling a bit cocky, and I went out there and I completely forgot my lines.
And that's what happens.
And I just went out and then it was like a cascade. It was like a sheet fall of ice where like the whole face just falls off and goes in the ocean. There's just this wave, and that wave was a wave of terror.
Yes.
And then I just looked towards the guy, Terry Johnson, who actually is Gallery Road, but he was a school teacher back then, and he just looked at me and just said the first couple of lines, and that was fine, because it just took me out of that moment.
Yes.
Taking yourself out of the moment was one of the biggest things.
Yeah,
so when you're doing those kind of things like acting, how did the acting then get into the other aspects of the art? Has all of this that we've looked at all culminated into one certain thing, or you were talking about going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next?
Yeah, well, I'm very eclectic, and I seem to, I either have a kind of dispersed focus and I'm a bit lost, or I get hyper focused on one thing and I drill it to death. But what happens is I do that and I get extremely passionate about it, but then I kind of need a rest, or I've had enough, or I'm suddenly bored of it, and I move on. And I do this cyclically. So in some ways I kind of envy those people who have one interest, one goal, and they master it. They just stick at it and stick at it and stick at it. Where I've just gone in circles, playing with all sorts of things that are creative, and I find that each thing inspires and feeds into the other in ways that are very difficult to articulate, but then again, that's what art is. Art is trying to articulate these things. So it's difficult to articulate precisely what acting will do for your computer-generated art, or for your painting, or for your poetry, or for your writing, but it definitely does something. It allows you to see in different ways and create in different ways.
This sounds very much like, I had to use this analogy, but it's like cooking out of a cookbook and then completely realising that you don't have a certain ingredient, and then you just make do with what you've had in the past, because you've known that, well, I don't have this herb or this spice, or I don't have mayonnaise, but then you start sweetening with honey as opposed to sugar, and you know what those things taste like, and you know that it should sort of work, but you don't know how it's going to work out.
Well, that's right, but then, to sort of push the metaphor, then do you think that the tap dancing will somehow inform you on your culinary decisions? And it sounds crazy, but that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about all, sampling. I guess I'm one of these people who likes to sample. I won't necessarily stay there. I won't necessarily embrace it, but I like to taste a bit of everything, even if I hate it, even if it's not my cup of tea, so to speak. But there are challenges involved, and sometimes you never know. And so now acting, I've been acting amateur and professional, mostly stage, theatre, a little bit of film, for about 20 years. And I haven't studied acting at all. And before that, I studied psychology and computer science. And when I first took up acting, a lot of people didn't believe me. They were confused, and they said, "You're not an actor. Why are you acting? You sit in front of your PC. You're like a nerdy programmer that just." And I was, but acting grabbed me, and so I took it up, and now a lot of people know me as a performer, and they probably don't realise I have a computer background. So yeah, it's very interesting.
When did all of this interest in art and performing start? Was it the art came first, or was it what I call the higher functioning intellect of having something logical and a process and a system kind of thinking, or an artistic kind of thinking? Which one do you think sort of came first? Or
I think it's because of the fact that I'm borderline and down the middle on so many in so many ways, that makes me pursue these things. So for example, I've often been seen as logical and scientific by artistic friends, and seen as artistic and creative by scientific friends. So because I'm down the middle, I enjoy both, and sometimes I try to make them work and meet together. So I can program, which is unbelievably logic oriented. If it's not logic, it just won't work. That's what programming is. But then to program things which are creative, you're suddenly mixing the two in a very interesting way. But it's multi-level. So the basis of it is logic, is a computer. It must be logic, it must be zeros, ones, black, white, yes, no. It has to be, or it won't work. But what's always intrigued me is that you can layer on top of that creative ideas. And so when I was about, my dad is a programmer, so he always encouraged me. When I was 10 or 11, I was programming my own games, and even AI stuff, simple AI stuff. This is in the early 80s. What you would call chatbots these days. I was doing that sort of stuff on the Commodore 64 and things like that.
Oh, that brings back memories. Commodore 64, programming a whole 10 or 12 pages out of a magazine in my Commodore 64 in BASIC, and typing lines of data, and it was literally like
you get one wrong.
Yeah, 1080 data. A number, comma,
128, 107, 63, yeah.
And then typing all this data in, and then saving it, and then typing those three-letter word. It's like, what's going to happen? Is my whole thing going to freeze? RUN.
Yeah. Make sure you save it first, because it's likely it's just going to.
Yeah.
And often with those you would have what's called checksums, which would make it a bit easier. If you didn't have what's called a checksum, which essentially was checking your input as you went, then it was very, very difficult, because of course all these numbers, as I say, we're talking about a computer, so you do one tiny typo. For a human, we don't care much, but a computer, you've just blown it up. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work, end of story. So I was very passionate about computers when I was young, kind of 10 or 11 was when it sparked off. And then from there, I'd always scrawled, I'd always had sketchbooks and notes and ideas, I'd always scrawled things, but I didn't really have much formal education in art, although I ended up studying it in matric. I think I did art and computing and things like that. And then I was so fascinated about the artistic process and my own process and how things work and how people think, that I ended up studying psychology. And that was also because I had an interest in cognitive science, which is the artificial intelligence and artificial life side of things. That was my formal background. But the eclectic part of me has taken up music. So, for example, music, I've done assorted gigs and compositions and things like that, but I have no formal training in music either. So I've been very autodidactic. I'm very self-taught, self-learning, always trying to learn new things, always reading up on new things, and I think that's a big part of my process.
And where you're at now, and where do you, like, you're very much known for your computer art, artificial intelligence. Where do you see that going when it comes to the next step? You've got all this influence and understanding and history behind where you are now. Is it going to become a virtual reality kind of artwork, or is it going to become...
Possibly. Virtual reality is another thing that's very interesting. I mean, the thing is, and this comes down to this to and fro and this eclectic style of working and thinking, and this focused shift that I kind of have issues with, is that sometimes, a lot of the time, I don't know where I'm heading, so to speak. It's almost like I have two modes, to use the computer metaphor, input and output. And if I'm not sure about where I'm headed creatively, I usually start to voraciously absorb and eat, metaphorically. And you know, I start looking at things and studying things and reading lots of things and learning things, and maybe learning how to do VR and how to do certain graphics packages and things like that. And then I will shift, when I feel comfortable enough, to an output mode, and I'll start producing things, producing works, producing music, VR, whatever it is, and then the kind of cycle continues. I had a little bit of struggle with health the last kind of decade, mental and physical health, and that doesn't help. But I tend to think that this is almost a pandemic in itself. You know, there are fantastic things about Western society in the 21st century, and the way that we operate, and the politics and the capitalism has done wonderful things. But I think it's also starting to show that there are serious flaws, and so I think these kind of physical and mental hurdles that people are overcoming, it seems to me that more and more people have these hurdles that they need to overcome. Now, this could also be the fact that they're brought to the fore more these days. People can, it seems easier to analyse and to pick up, and in a sense there's more help around. But there is something kind of alienating about our existence, and this is where it comes to creativity and improvisation too. I'm very sad when I hear people say, "Oh, I couldn't do that. I'm not an artist. I'm not a musician." And to me, this is a very Western way of thinking, to compartmentalize being an artist, or being a musician, or being a creative.
Do you think the way we are now as a society, when you talk about that, is that people would rather not try to do something and fail, rather than try something new and do miserably?
There is a bit of that, and like I say, I think we need to encourage that. And again, this is the individualistic side, the competitive side. So it's like, if you can't do it, then don't do it. And it's very big now, you know, the idea that you specialise, that you choose something you're good at and you drill into it and you become an expert. And that's all great if you want to do that. But like I say, I feel in some ways like I'm at odds. I'm kind of more of I embrace like the idea of the Renaissance man. I like to dabble in lots of things, and my drive for doing something it isn't the usual drives. It's not financially motivated. It's not about making a living. It's about discovering and inventing, and it's very self-sufficient. It's all down to me. It's what I want to learn, what I want to achieve, what I want to discover. If I can make money from it, great. But of course, that issue of if I make money, great, has become so pressing now that's why a lot of us struggle, because you're drummed into you that no, you know, this isn't an option. You must learn how to make money. If you can't make money, if you can't survive financially, you're just kind of kicked out on the street, and it's up to you to survive. Fortunately, we're not too bad in Australia in terms of welfare and support and that sort of thing. But you look at something like the US, for example, or, you know, I think with my personality type, and with my chronic illness, I think sometimes if I was in some other less fortunate, less charitable part of the world, I'd probably be dead. And I think humanity has reached a point where we have the means and the ability to support everyone. And so why don't we? And of course, I understand it's much more complex issue than that. But that's it in essence. And I have the feeling this is an awakening that's what people are thinking now. More and more people are thinking, hang on, getting the latest X, Y, Z, fantastic, car, this, that, the other. It feels great, but if all of these material assets and resources are available, why are there people living on $1 a day? Why are there people who can't survive? And as soon as you bring up the evil word socialism, you just sort of instantly shouted down, and it's all about socialism in the context of history, in the context of, say, Stalin or something, saying it's been done, it doesn't work, we've tried it, it's failed, forget it, do not think anything. And then you say, well, even healthcare, things like that, these are sort of socialist ideas, and we have those. So we just need to incorporate more of that.
It's interesting with socialism, because when it comes to photography or politics or anything, there was some time back that I was a member of the Greens Party here in Mount Gambier, and I was very much into their way of thinking and read their policies and looked at the renewable energy and the progressive way of thinking, the socialism. And then the more I started questioning the motives behind certain people, and when I actually talked to Mark Parnell, who was the leader of the Greens in South Australia, and they said, you have to understand that the Greens Party, as we know it now, is a collection of people with their own agendas. Yeah. And some agendas tend to be at the expense of others. Yeah. And if you have a holistic idea of what a lot of people would agree on, is that everyone should have universal health care and those kind of aspects, and why is one person worth more than the other. And then I start looking at capitalism and some of the ideas behind capitalism and how that has also benefited society as well. Yes. And when I then looked at renewable energies and then looked at the wind farms and then realised how much concrete is required for the footing of one windmill and the infrastructure that's required to get the trucks. So then I just tore myself up into a ball, and I just went, I'm doing a Pontius Pilate, I'm washing my hands of this blood, and I'm done. But well, and you use an extreme on anything. Like you talk about socialism, and you say, look at Pol Pot, look at Stalin, and you look at the complete other side, and you go, what about fascism and like the Nazi Party? And as soon as you say something's going to be like capitalist or right wing, instantly you're a Nazi. There is no there is no recourse. It's a bit like some people when it comes to the current state of society today about getting the COVID vaccine that had come out, and it's been based off of other things that have been proven, but it's been forced out very quickly. Yeah. And as soon as someone puts up with their hand and says, well, actually, this came out pretty quickly, and I'm not really sure of it. Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. No, I've actually had my measles, mumps, rubella. I've had typhoid. I've had the flu vax for the last 5 years. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And so it's like a black and white, like we talked about beforehand. It's like, this is socialism. Yes. That is Nazism. And there is no middle ground. There is high contrast, black and white image.
Yeah, well, we've lost a lot of nuance, and we all thought the internet would be fantastic, and it is, but things like social media and things have pushed polarizing views, and that is very frustrating, and that's exactly what you're talking about there, is everything is seen in black and white. You make a comment and you're jumped on as representing the most extreme side.
It's like one echo chamber is arguing with the other echo chamber, and
it's actually really hard work, but I'm, again, with my eclectic nature, I mean, in essence, I can take a position and I can logically argue for a position, and I can do that. But I don't strongly believe in anything, and in some ways, I think that's a good position to take. But again, it varies, and I envy those sort of people who do have strong opinions, because it tends to mean that they have strong actions and they get things done. And the problem with not having strong opinions is being very wishy-washy. But at the same time, I'm very adaptable, open to science. I tend to say, well, what does the science say? What does the evidence say? That's what we should be doing. Drop moral judgments and just look at where the evidence is pointing. Yes, but this polarization is a big issue, and it is difficult because I like to associate with people who I disagree with for that very reason, and I like to talk to people who I disagree with. And I'm usually pretty cool, calm, and rational. I don't get angry and yell at people, but they might get angry and yell at me. That's the problem.
So I was going to check this to make sure it's still going. It should be.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
Yeah. No, it's disagreement. It's interesting when you have a well thought out argument, and some people have lost the nuance to have an insightful argument or to listen to the other person. A lot of times, a lot of people are hearing what the person's saying, but formulating their answer.
Yes.
Before they've actually heard the other person out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what happens now is that some people's ideas essentially aren't their own. They will go into a certain group that has taken them in, absorb their ideas as their own, even though it's not their own thinking, and will argue that group's point to another person. So when they're talking to someone, from, let's say, for example, left wing or right wing or whatever it is, they are trying to sit down under the guise of a discussion, but they're just trying to force their group thing up onto, that's an Orwellian term, isn't it?
That's right.
They're trying to turn, so sometimes it's interesting, like you talk about the internet having an influence on society and how we want to belong to groups. We are social beings, we do want to be accepted. And like I've written once before, is like we all want to be the most unique petal in the flower of life, but we want to belong to the whole field. That's right.
And again, we had that's kind of how, it's almost my philosophy. I mean, that's kind of how you see life. These kind of polar opposites, or these opposites represent, who said that? I don't know, there's some famous philosopher. But the idea that these kind of opposites define the whole. I mean, that's how you understand the whole is through the opposites. I've never really been into politics or economics. I mean, I can find them interesting on one level, abstract level, but it's the fact that they are so complicated. I think that's what it is. It's the fact that they are so complicated and people are very blasé about it, and that can annoy me. So it can be, I might say, I don't have a very strong political opinion this way or the other. I don't think of myself as right wing or left wing, but if you just look at the evidence of my thought and opinion on things, you'll probably see that I kind of lean to the left. But I don't think that's important. Again, this is just boxing people, categorising them. As soon as you can box them in somewhere, then you can say, what's wrong with that?
No, I wouldn't say that you're a kind of person that has boxed yourself in, because if left wing was to be art and right wing was to be science, you are definitely neither. So you've got a combination of left brain, left wing, right wing. You've got that combination, and you've created essentially what's your own identity, and you don't really feel the need to be in any one camp.
Firmly plant a flag in one particular. That's right. And as I say, the pros and cons to that is that being very flexible, means that you're not as headstrong sometimes. You're not as convincing, or you're not as, and that can be interesting. Sometimes I can have argument, in the traditional term, meaning a discussion, not necessarily yelling at each other, but have an argument, and it'll be, 20 minutes, half an hour in, that I'll say, look, I disagree with this position. I'm just arguing out of, and they'll be shocked. They'll go, oh, okay. It's like, no, I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just kind of devil's advocate, or I'm just exploring this, or I'm exploring that. And I'm prepared to admit I could be wrong about anything and everything. And it's a very eye-opening and creative way to see the world. But but as I say, it has its negatives as well in terms of just sort of action oriented. I mean, that's what I miss. I can kind of get just lost in how complicated everything is, and you know, how we, in essence, we know nothing, and you can get paralysed sometimes by this point of view. And again, you start to envy people who know that this is a fact. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out and do that. Whereas I can get stuck because I go, well, I think that, but hey, there's a good argument for that too. I'm not sure where I am. And of course, I guess that's where the artistic side comes in. You deal with it in ways, I mean, like I said earlier, the whole point is you say, oh, I'm struggling to articulate this. And so that's what your art is, in essence, is doing. You're trying to bring everything in and you're trying to articulate it in an image, and then someone will say, explain that image. And it's like, well, I can't. The image explains itself. That's the whole point of the image, is it's supposed to evoke thoughts, feelings, reactions, which I'm trying to bring about. But yeah.